Everybody, this is the Honourable Rose Jackson, MP of New South Wales. And we are so excited. Thank you so much for taking the time out of what I imagine is an extremely busy schedule at the moment to talk to us today.
It is actually nuts at the moment because the government cancelled the Parliment for a whole long period of time during the lockdown, and so now we are catching up. So look, there might be bells in the background, there might be going on. That's okay, just ignore that. I am here to talk. But yeah, you know, there might be stuff going on in the background.
No, that's amazing. When you were like, could we start a little bit earlier just in case I have to go and vote? I was like, sure, please, let's start early. No worries.
And we're doing important legislation at the moment. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is the changes to the sexual consent laws in New South Wales, which is really important law to actually provide victims and survivors of sexual assault with proper protection in our legal system and proper recourse to justice. So we are doing important things. It's good at the moment.
I think we looked at those recently. Were those the affirmative consent laws?
That's right.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's a really good step in the right direction for especially a lot of us women out here who might be,
absolutely,
survivors or having experienced anything like that. To start with, would you love to tell everybody about how you got interested in politics, where it all started for you? Because I'm sure everybody would love to know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got active when I was kind of at school and into uni. And I guess there were kind of three things that really motivated me. One was Pauline Hanson. So I was actually at high school when she first came onto the scene in the late 90s, and just to have someone in our national parliament kind of spout that racism was really confronting to me and really motivated me to get active and push back. And so I was at some of the first kind of school strikes that we actually had against racism in the late 90s against Pauline Hanson. I mean, the other one was John Howard. You know, I'm of the Howard generation in that my entire high school, he was the Prime Minister of Australia, and just such a reaction to so much of the agenda that he was pushing, like the conservatism, the backward view of Australian history, you know, opposition to Indigenous rights, to gay rights, to women's rights. So that really, you know, motivated me to go, I don't want the leaders of this country to look like that. I need to step up. And I guess also, when I got to uni, I got really involved in feminism. I got really involved in women's activism, you know, running big campaigns to call out domestic violence, to call out sexual harassment and sexualization of women on campus and stuff like that. And so through all those different movements, I went, there's a whole lot of voices out there that aren't speaking for me, aren't saying the things that I want to say, and I want my voice heard. And I guess that just led me to be really interested in politics and to make my career in it.
Seriously, incredible. Do you think it was particularly difficult for you as a woman to kind of navigate that space and kind of push towards having a voice in what can often be sometimes a really male-dominated political arena, I suppose?
Yeah, look, you know what? I actually think I'm incredibly lucky, Pix, because I sort of was lifted up and bolstered by some of the incredible women who were the kind of generation before me. Tanya Plibersek, Julia Gillard, Jenny Macklin, Penny Wong. So I feel like they created so much space for me. I didn't actually, you know, feel as though there were that many barriers to me. But you know what I did see? Like, I actually check my own privilege here. I am a white, straight, middle-class woman. And yeah, we need more women in politics. But I look around and there's women like me, and that's great. But I just do not see enough Indigenous women. I don't see enough LGBTI women. I don't see enough women with disabilities. And so whilst I reckon space has been created for me, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to give voices to different groups who are underrepresented. Look, having said that, definitely sexism, definitely toxic environments. But I had so many great sisters around me as well that, you know, we have our own little community, like in the parliament of the other women, because there's a bunch of us now. And we can all just like sit together, chat together, you know, call out the bullshit together. And I actually really love that and find that a really great space.
Do you find those relationships even happening across the aisle where you're all debating legislation and stuff like that as well?
100%. 100%. Like the sisterhood is cross-party as well. Like I really believe that. Women from the Greens, women from the Liberal Party, women from the National Party, we definitely connect, on issues of shared interest. And I actually think that's really important because, I'm political, I'm Labor, I've got my politics, but my identity is actually more than that.
Yeah.
And so capacity to connect with people who are from different parties but have shared interest is really important.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I think that's really cool. So what is your actual job? What do you do? Is just think of this as a introduction to a lot of people who are politically engaged, but a lot of the politics and the discourse on the internet is very American-centric. And so the way that Australian politics often gets framed is through that kind of American lens rather than through what's actually happening on a state level in Australia. So what's your job? What do you do?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so to break it down, there are 3 levels of government in Australia. Local government, that's like your council, your local council. If you live in New South Wales, local council elections are on the 4th of December, so make sure you vote. Federal government, that's Scott Morrison, that's Anthony Albanese, that's the national guys, they are in Canberra. And then there's the state government for New South Wales, for me, the state that I live in. And I'm in that parliament. We're based in Sydney, so I don't go to Canberra. I'm Sydney-based. We just cover the state of New South Wales. There are 2 chambers, they're called. There's the lower house. That's like the electorates that are based on suburbs. Every sort of the different suburbs have their different representatives. And then there's this thing called the upper house, which is a little bit like the Senate of New South Wales. So we, like a house of review, we sit above the Legislative Assembly, and I'm in that. So I am a legislative councillor. That is my official title. And I sit in the New South Wales Legislative Council, and I participate in making laws for New South Wales and sitting on committees and doing reviews for our laws, for our state. And I'm also the shadow minister for water, housing and homelessness. And look, don't ask me why it's such a weird collection of portfolios. That's just the job I was given. And you know what? I'm happy to do it. But it is weird. Like, it's just totally, why are those things together? They just are. And so for the Labor Party, I am responsible for our policies and our positions on water, on housing and on homelessness. And I do that in addition to all of my other work, just being a member of Parliament for the people of New South Wales.
Right. So I've seen you push back against a lot of, I guess, proposed legislation that doesn't go far enough or just doesn't even address the problem entirely. Would you say that your job is making sure that the legislation that is passed is how the people passing that legislation are accountable to an extent?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's right. So I'm in the opposition. In New South Wales, the majority of members of Parliament are Liberal and National members. And so the Liberal and National Party is in government because they have the most members. Labor is the minority in New South Wales. So we're the opposition. It's different in the different states. I do a lot of holding them accountable because the stuff that they're pushing, that's not my values. That's not my priorities. That's not where I'm coming from. That's a different set of political principles than those that I believe in. So absolutely holding them accountable to the things that I was elected. Because people, when they voted for me, they want someone who's going to stand up for climate change, for housing affordability, for rights at work, for women's rights. That's why people vote for me and vote for Labor. And that's the stuff that I want to be a voice for. And yeah, a lot of what the government pushes here in New South Wales doesn't represent that. So yeah, I got to push back.
Do you think it's hard to get progressive voices across in Australian politics? Do you think that there are some challenges there with getting the voices through to like a younger, more progressive demographic here in Australia?
Absolutely, I do. I think, we do have a problem with the way that the mainstream media, I think, give voice to different interests. And so it's actually fantastic that people like you are prepared to use your platforms to give voice, to political ideas and a vision for our country that isn't maybe what you read every day in the newspaper. So, yeah, I think that's a problem. I think it's also a problem because young people are just so chronically underrepresented in our political system. So I'm in my mid-30s and I am definitely one of the youngest members of Parliament. There's a couple of us in our mid-30s, but it's almost all boomers and Gen X. In terms of Gen Y and millennials, even though, we're a substantial portion of the population, we're a tiny proportion of our elected representatives. So that definitely does affect the voice that we have, and how hard it is to get our voices heard.
Do you think that's because people feel like electoralism has kind of failed them? Like there isn't enough accountability within the system? Because I hear it from people all the time where they're like, oh, well, what are we going to do? Like, it's not like we can fight back against the system anyway. What would you say to those people who are kind of feeling that way?
I completely understand. I understand people feeling disenfranchised. I understand them feeling like lost to the system and like their voice doesn't matter. What I would say to those people is that is how the people in power want you to feel. They want you to feel powerless. They want you to feel disenfranchised, because when you step back and say, that I'm not there, why that space isn't for me, we actually create a vacuum and other interests and other powers fill it. We have to take up the space we've been given. And it's not easy, and I acknowledge those feelings of frustration and disenfranchisement, but, we can acknowledge the things that we have achieved, the advances that we have made. And it is just so important that we don't throw up our hands and walk away, because when we create that space, they're going to fill it. They're going to fill it with a conservative agenda that doesn't represent what we want. So we've got to understand the power that we have if we do lean in, step up and use our voices. And we can do things. The sexual consent laws that we were talking about earlier is a great example of that. That has only happened 100% because young women stepped up, and young men too, and there's a lot of allies who have been really great. But that would not have happened if it wasn't for people like Saxon Mullins, Chantal Contos and others, young women who went, stuff this, I'm speaking my truth. And they've changed the law. And that's a really powerful thing. And so that's just one example of the things that we can do when we fill the space.
So if you were giving some practical advice to young people looking to get involved locally or on a state level, what are some steps that they could take to actually, engage in praxis and, get involved?
Yeah, definitely get in touch with members of Parliament who you like and whose kind of values align with yours, and see if there's opportunities for work experience or internships. A lot, we have interns in our office, a lot of people do that, and it's a great way just to kind of dip your toe in the water, see as a practical step, could I do this? Do I want to, make this my career? The second thing I'd say is join a political party. Now, look, I'm going to say join Labor, but if you're a Green, join the Greens. If you like what the Libs have to say, join the Libs, the Nats. Join a party, and those party structures do provide a good pathway. Almost all of them have youth wings, youth groups in them, and I was in Young Labor, and I met heaps of friends, I met my husband, and it did help provide a platform for me to get involved. And even if you don't agree with 100% of a party's policies, you're never necessarily going to agree 100%. But if you want to have a career in politics, I really encourage you to join a political party. And that is a great practical step to find ways to work for an MP, be an MP, support an MP, and it's cheap and it's easy. So that's a tip.
Nice. Yeah, when I said that I had invited you on, they were like, a Labor member? And I'm like, trust me, she is the left of Labor. She's very cool. And then we watched a little bit of your first speech to Parliament in 2019, I think it was. And you basically sold the other half of my audience when you argued for legalizing marijuana. So
that's another great example of something that I haven't achieved yet, but we're going to get there on that. That is and something that is inevitable, but it is only going to happen if we get together and get organized, guys. And look, hey, how long did it take to deliver marriage equality? Too long in a way, but we got there. We can make change. We can make change. And legalizing cannabis is something that is a no-brainer and is going to happen. But it's not going to happen if we just go, no, we'll leave it to other people. Yeah. They're not going to do it. We got to do it. And so I'm really passionate about that one. And get active in politics. Join a political party. Have your voice heard. And that's another change we're going to make.
Nice. So on that note, what would you say is the proudest change that you have witnessed so far? Is there anything that you would say that you are proudest of so far?
Look, probably because I'm in opposition, I don't write the laws, right? Like if I put something forward, they vote it down because the majority is Liberal and National in my parliament. A couple of things that I am really proud of are, though, giving a voice to cannabis legalization and drug law reform. That's something that I think we've made progress on that, and it's something that's important to me, and I feel like I've really pushed. I also, I am really proud of being part of standing up to some of the really reactionary bullies in the New South Wales Parliament. Again, people like Mark Latham and others use our parliament to just launch these insane and offensive attacks against vulnerable people in our community, LGBTIQ kids, trans people, working people, climate activists. They just launch these attacks. And I'm really proud of just standing up to that bullying, and I played a role in just really shutting that down and being an alternative voice. And I think that is important because oftentimes you do just want to ignore them and go, don't give them oxygen, don't engage. But sometimes you do just have to come in and say, no, that's not acceptable. And so I think that's been good. And, look, one other thing that I was proud of is, I was really proud of the kind of support that we got when we called out the New South Wales government for stuffing up RuPaul's Drag Race in Australia. That was another thing when we lost Drag Race to New Zealand because the New South Wales government just did absolutely nothing. And when Michelle Visage commented and shared my TikTok, I was like, that's it. Game over.
This is the best. That's so great.
That's I hope to do much more than that. Like, I want to get Labor in government, obviously, and actually be the one changing the laws on our, drug law reform, changing the laws on housing affordability. And, I hope to have that chance down the track, but unfortunately we've got to have an election first.
So this wasn't on the list, but how have you felt about the handling of the pandemic by the New South Wales government? How would you have handled the situation differently if you could have?
Yeah, in general, we've tried to not kind of create a lot of division in New South Wales. Like, I look at Victoria and I look at what the opposition, the Labor's in government there, and I look at what the opposition has done there, and we just go, we don't want to be those jerks. Like, we don't want to be those people that are creating a platform for psychos to carry around nooses and have death threats. So we've been really careful not to be divisive and difficult here. Having said that, I think there's been a lot that the New South Wales government could have done better. I guess two examples that I would try and give are, one, I thought that the dividing of Sydney in the recent lockdown was really problematic. I thought, look, we've got to smash this virus, we've got to get serious, but to have so many people, particularly in Western Sydney, living, under curfews, under such strict laws, I just thought, come on, we are all in this together. Like, we got to come together, we got to support each other. And I thought that dividing of Sydney was problematic. The other thing I think that they just have not done is been there enough for support for vulnerable people. Like, we had to drag them kicking and screaming to support renters, to support casual workers, to support people on government income support. Like, when they first brought in government income, the disaster payments, you couldn't access them if you were like on youth allowance.
Yeah.
And, they changed it, but not after we made such a fuss. And so it's often like, the first instinct is the big businesses and they're suffering, and I get that. But vulnerable people who are on government income support, who are young people, casual workers, they're never at the forefront of the government's thinking. And so I think that was a real problem, and they should have done more on that.
Yeah, I feel like that's contributing towards the apathy of young people as well, because they do feel so just not represented by government at the moment. And like what you were saying about the way that Victoria handled the pandemic and the outrageous things that have been said by the opposition, which, I mean, I've covered a lot of it. That's what I do on my channel, but it's it's actually been outrageous to see the use of something that is happening so severely, and a global thing that's happening, used to create division between a community, and especially seeing what's going on at the protests and having people not speak out against that. I feel like so many people my age and younger, even way younger than me potentially, are really struggling to see how things can change and things can get better. How would you say the state government is doing on climate change at the moment?
Well, I mean, look, they've committed to, I mean, look, they could be worse, to be honest. You know, I mean, it's not saying a lot, but they could be. I mean, considering, you know, we got Barnaby Joyce and Scott Morrison at the federal level, the New South Wales government isn't as bad as them. They have committed to net zero by 2050. They have committed to a 50% emissions reduction target by 2030. Those are good targets. But the problem is, that's great to say that. The effort to get there just is not there, in my view. And, you know, we have been calling on them, for example, to legislate those targets, to actually put them in law. It's, you know, we're getting to the point, like, the time for talk is over. You know, we need, like, what are we doing to close the coal-fired power stations that are slated to close in New South Wales and transition away to alternative? Like, what is the actual plan and the policies to not just say we're going to get to net zero by 2050, but to actually affect that change? And so that, I think, is a real problem in New South Wales. I think there's been a lot of talk and patting themselves on the back, but when I actually look at the work that they're doing, it's really problematic. The other thing that has just been an absolute just dumpster fire in New South Wales is land clearing. And I don't want to get too policy wonky for people, but, like, let me just break it down for you. You know, we think about land clearing, we think about cutting down trees. People think, oh, what's happening in the Amazon? You know, that's so bad. New South Wales is clearing land faster right now than Brazil. Like, we are just chopping down trees like you would not believe it. The land and, you know, this is threatening. Like, we're gonna have koalas extinct in New South Wales because of the land clearing. So I know it's not always as sexy, but, like, this is stuff that goes on, you know, and like, people don't sort of necessarily always follow it, but we gotta plant trees. We don't want to be chopping them down.
Yeah, it's making these sorts of conversations accessible to people. And I think one of the hardest things is because so many people, so many young people especially these days, when dealing with these issues, look at it all, go, it's all too overwhelming. I have no idea how to deal with every problem. What is what are the skills that you have? What are the things that you use to get through the day when, you know, some of the stuff that you're dealing with is really heavy? Like, what are the things that keep you motivated?
What I'd say to that is, you know, I say to young people, like, back yourselves. You know, like, you are, I know what you're saying, that sense of, like, oh my God, I don't understand everything, or it's overwhelming. Like, honestly, back yourselves, have that confidence. I know that imposter syndrome too. Like, I know that sense of, oh, am I kind of smart enough or good enough to be here, and can I understand all of this? And you know what? Here's a secret. I'm in here. So many of my colleagues, they're thick. They're dunderheads. You see these people up close. You'd be shocked. Young people out there who are half interested in politics, you are just as smart, just as switched on, just as worthy as a place at the table as half the people that I'm dealing with every day. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is, I definitely do have to try and prioritize. Like, I do have to be disciplined and say, yep, there are 100 things in New South Wales, Australia, the world that I would like to change and that I would like to speak up on, but I can't do that. And so I will pick the top, 5 or 10 that matter to me right now. And that doesn't mean that the other things aren't important, but right now there's just not space on my bandwidth. And that's a practiced skill picks. Like, that's something that I've had to practice over time. That's, the power of saying no. And, we do have to do that in our lives. And once we can do that, though, you can, create it. So, I do a lot on drug law reform, obviously housing and homelessness, environment and water, wage theft. I'm interested in other issues too, but, I do try and create a little bit of like boundaries around my work that allow me to affect the change that I want to see without just constantly being distracted. Because there's heaps of other important stuff going on. I get that.
Yeah, I generally just try and tell people to the best of my ability to worry about what's in their sphere, the things that they can actively engage in and affect, and hopefully that reduces the load.
That's right. And don't feel guilty. Like, don't beat yourself up because you're not in another space. Like, Aizen, I know that feeling of, oh, shit, that is a really important issue and I care about that. And now I'm going to feel bad because I don't have all the time to that. No, it's okay. As I said, pick your issues, your passions, as you said, the things that are in your space, care about them, do them well, and back yourself. If you're watching this and, following politics and are interested in it, you are already, so far ahead of so many of the, morons who occupy the political sphere, in my view. So, go for it.
So that's one of the skills that I guess you need to be active in Parliament. What would you say are some of the other skills someone might need if they were looking to engage at a similar level to you or in Australian politics in general?
Yeah. Communication skills I do think is important. So, giving speeches, giving interviews, persuading people, like taking the issues of the day, the political issues, and being able to communicate about them. Again, those are skills that you can practice. People throughout history have, practiced public speaking and, practice giving interviews and, practice to yourself in front of the mirror or, find someone to talk to. But communication skills are really important, I think.
Yep.
I think that the other, important skill is, I don't know, relationships, I guess, or I don't know how you want to describe that. You do have to be able to connect with your colleagues. It's, it's if it's your way or the highway every time, but politics ain't for you in a way. Unfortunately, you have to be able to meet people halfway, compromise, give a little, take a little. And so, again, just those relationship skills, that's how we make change. You can't just come in here as a member of Parliament and say, this is it, this is the way I want it done, everyone else can piss off. If that's your attitude, you're never going to get anything done. So I do think those are some other skills that are pretty important.
Yeah. And you're a mama.
Yes.
What are some of the challenges of being a mother and working in Parliament?
Yes, it's hard. I have two kids. I have a 9-year-old and a 3-year-old. And yeah, look, it's definitely crazy. My life is crazy. It's busy and it's nonstop and you feel guilty and, you miss them. Look, I have to say, to me, that's probably not that different to just any other working parent. Yeah. Like, we all have to make those sacrifices, but it is a busy job. Like, it is, I'm here late tonight. I'm often late. You got to just, use the village. Let's try and say two things about this. One, I don't try and minimize how difficult it is. Like, I don't try and say, oh, I'm some superwoman. I just, get on with it. It's easy. Bullshit. It's hard and I feel guilty and I feel bad and I miss my kids and they miss me and I have food on my clothes and, I use a lot of dry shampoo and, so yeah, it's hard. But the other thing I always say is you can do it. It is possible and we get there and we look after each other. And as I said, there's a great community of mums in here that have got each other's backs. And so do not be put off. If you think, oh, I don't know if I can manage that career with my family, you can do it. And it is possible.
It sounds like you're doing an incredible job. Do you talk to your kids? I know they're quite young. Do you talk to your kids about social issues or politics or anything like that, even though they're, in primary school or not even yet?
Look, I mean, no, the 3-year-old, he doesn't have any idea what's going on.
Yeah.
He used to call Gladys Berejiklian Parliament Lady. You know, Parliament Lady, when he saw her on the TV. So he doesn't have any idea what's going on. The 9-year-old, definitely. I will talk to her about what's going on. She's interested in the environment. One of the things she's really interested in is, the way that we treat refugees and asylum seekers. She's kind of switched on. She's read a bunch of those Anne Doe books, about his experience as a refugee, and she'll talk to me about that. I mean, that issue is more so in the federal scene than the state scene. But, yeah, I think it's really important to have conversations, even with young kids, about, the kind of world that they want to see. And, sure, she's not old enough to vote, but she has a voice, she has a view, and I definitely try and take that on and reflect some of kind of her values and priorities in the work that I'm doing. And look, I look at her, I look at all of the young people, not so much, the 9-year-olds, but the teenagers and the high school kids and the kids, who are at uni. And I think the future of this country is in good hands. I'm always so inspired by the activism and the priorities of young people.
So you would say that you are hopeful about the way that Australia is moving right now, or do you think that there is a lot more work to be done?
Yeah. I think there's a lot more work to be done, but I am hopeful. I am. As I said, I just refuse. The alternative to being hopeful is giving up, is saying, no, this is not working. And I refuse to do that because, as I said, that is exactly what Scott Morrison and Dom Perrottet want us to do. They want people like me and you and others to give up and say, no, the country's heading in the wrong direction. That's not what I want to see for this world and this country, so I'm out. And I refuse to do that. I refuse to give up. And so therefore I'm hopeful because, as I said, right now there's a hell of a lot that I want to change, but there are actually so many great people in the Parliament, in the community, who get in touch with me and working together. I think there's a lot we can achieve.
I think that's pretty inspiring. Are you happy to take a couple of questions from the chat? If I ask them, it'll take a couple of seconds to come through. But chat, if there is anything you would like to ask Rose here tonight, feel free to drop a question now if you want to, because we have I think a few more minutes. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to have this conversation with us, because most of the time I cover the news in a kind of newsreader voice, and then we just talk about it as a community, kind of to, I guess, to have some community to consume that kind of news with, instead of sitting in front of the TV and just kind of, absorbing it all alone. And yeah, that's kind of what we do. And this is kind of my first time I've been able to have a conversation with someone like you, who is out there on the ground, impacting the way our democracy functions. And I think that's really cool. And so thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you. As I said, if you use your platform, that's fantastic. I think it's great. It's hard for me to get my voice and issues up, on mainstream radio and mainstream newspapers sometimes. So, I'm really thankful that you take space.
We'll try and make it more accessible for everyone.
Yeah.
Someone said, I see the band on your wrist. What music festival did you go to?
Oh my God. Okay. Yes, thank you. So this is disgusting. I wish I had been at a music festival. Parliament, every day we get rapid antigen tested for COVID. And so every morning we have to do a rapid antigen test. And when we, pass our test, we have to wear this throughout the rest of the day. And look, this actually is acceptable. Yes, the other day was lime green. It was disgusting. I had to wear a lime green wristband. So no festival for me. It's one of those things, Parliament, we all get rapid antigen testing. We're also looked after in here. And yet every day there's young people, they're going to Coles, they're going to Woolies, they're going to DJs, they're working. No, they're not getting rapid antigen testing. It's just sure, we need to make sure that our parliament is COVID safe, but it's pretty unfair, I think, when we ask young people to go and do their jobs on the front line, and they don't have access to any of that stuff.
Yeah. This is a pretty cool question. I see that Rose is the Shadow Minister for Water, Housing and Homelessness. What are some easy wins that the current government isn't doing which would make housing more accessible?
Well, I mean, the first thing is just building more housing. I mean, that's not the answer to everything here, unfortunately, but that is the New South Wales government is not nearly building enough houses to keep up with demand. So don't want to get too wonky, but the Productivity Commission has said we need 44,000 houses a year to be brought online. They're currently bringing online around 30. So there's just a massive gap. So they should just have a policy to build more houses. And it's not like other government, they can't do that. It's not like, oh, that's actually a really hard thing. No. The Victorian government has invested billions of dollars, $5 billion to build more houses. The Queensland government has invested almost $3 billion. If your priority is dealing with housing affordability, you can do that. So that is one really easy thing they can do. The second thing they can do is fix our rental laws. They are completely out of whack with the other states. It is completely unfair the way renters are treated. You can be evicted for no reason, halfway through your lease, given a little bit of notice, that's it, you're out. There are no limits on rental increases. There are no minimum standards for renters. And so the rental experience is actually a complete dumpster fire in New South Wales. And that could be really easily changed. And if we provided more support, more security for renters, they could actually have a better lived experience and provide them the security to save up and buy a home as well. But currently, I get just bombarded with stories about how shit renting is in New South Wales. So I could talk about this right.
Oh no, I feel like a lot of us who sit here and rent are like, well, the thought of ever buying a house is just not an accessible thought to a lot of us. Another question that I think would be interesting to answer from the chat is, what's the most difficult thing about being in Parliament? Is there a particular challenge?
Look, for me, I would say the most difficult thing is being an opposition and just seeing the things that this government does and not being able to stop them. I guess that's a similar feeling of futility and, feelings of failure and disenfranchisement. Like, I feel that. I sit in here and they vote for things to become law that are dreadful and don't align with my values and don't represent the kind of state that I want to live in. And that's really hard.
Yeah.
I find that really difficult, not giving up in the face of losing all the time, to be honest. We are the opposition. We don't win votes in here. We don't make the laws in New South Wales. And so I find that hard. And I guess, what keeps me going is chats like this or, conversations with other people about, hey, there are actually people out there who feel the same way. I think the other hard thing, and more sort of on a personal level is, there's a lot of, I try and be active on social media. I try and be out there, and there's a lot of hate, there's a lot of people that want to tell you your shit, shut up, and like everyone, you just kind of ignore it and you block, but that's difficult. It's difficult to wake up every morning and, when I'm on the train and I'm checking Twitter or, it's like someone's just standing in front of you shouting at you about how shit you are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not even in Parliament and that happens to me, so I can't even imagine, oh, man, it's not nice, is it, when you wake up?
No,
and then,
it's not.
And then all of a sudden someone's calling you a fascist for being a progressive and it's like, hello!
Yeah,
what do you want me to do here?
Yeah, that's right. You try and I am someone that tries to engage maybe and explain, but I mean, how do you do that in a tweet?
Yeah.
Or in a Facebook comment? It's really hard. And so, I find that difficult because often I'm screaming, going, no, that's not what that's not fair or that's misrepresenting me or something. But, you got to just stay focused with that stuff and not let it get to you.
So if we're looking to see an increase in, I guess, progressive members of Parliament, because I feel like a lot of the times the progressive movement kind of gets split into people who want to work outside the system and people who want to work within the system to an extent. How would you encourage people, I guess, with progressive messaging to kind of get that across? Like, what are some of the messages that you have seen that really resonate with people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great characterization of the challenge that we sometimes have. And obviously the answer is working together. Obviously, some people are suited to and enjoy working in Parliament. Some people don't want to do that and would find it too frustrating. And we need those people active outside the Parliament on campaigns. And, obviously it's a partnership. Look, I mean, I think one of the things that, the progressive movement, should do, and I try and do, it's a quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but she said, fight for the things that you believe in, but do it in a way that brings other people with you. And, I think that's true. She well captures the idea that we're not compromising what we believe in. We will fight for equal rights, for housing affordability, for drug law reform, whatever it is, for action on climate change, but we won't do it by yelling at everyone else and telling them that they're stupid and wrong. Like, we will just ignore those bells. We will do it in a way.
Do you need to vote?
No,
okay, if you need.
No. We will do it in a way that brings people with us. And, that's not always an easy thing to do. You've got to find those connection points. You've got to explain. You've got to set things out. But if that's our guiding principle, if our principle is, yeah, our values are right, these are the things that we believe in, but we want to bring you with us, as opposed to, and if you don't already agree with us, you can piss off, then I think that's a good way to that's how I try and think about making change. And, where you've got to do that in the Parliament and out of the Parliament.
I think that's a really beautiful summary of how we can kind of all work together with even slightly different approaches to ideological outcomes towards hopefully a better world for more people. Rose, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to us. I have been glancing over at the chat and people seem to have really enjoyed what you have to say. Is there anything else you would like to say to my audience or to the wider, Twitch audience? Like, there's a bunch of gamers on here who might not even be politically engaged as well. So is there anything?
Look, gaming ain't my thing, although my daughter is obsessed with Roblox. So, I know that much. Look, what I would say is, make sure you're on the electoral roll. Make sure your friends are on the electoral roll. If you are interested in politics, we need you. Join a political party, get active, and just that same message of, there is space for you. There is space for you. You've just got to take it up. And when you don't take up that space, someone else takes it up. So, get in touch with me. You can DM me if you have any particular questions. I always try and be accessible to people, but do not give up. That is what our opponents want us to do. So get on the electoral roll, get your friends on the electoral roll, and get active in whatever issue you're passionate about. There is space for you there.
I think that's a wonderful way to end this interview. Thank you so much for your time.
No worries.
And everybody's saying thank you. So
thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we get to talk to you again sometime in the future. Hopefully when you're in a position to actually get some legislation through.
That's right. When I'm not the shadow minister, when I'm the actual minister.
Although everybody today was like, that's so cool. Like, what a title. Shadow minister.
Look, it's a cool title, but, the minister's the one who actually gets to make the decisions.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Cool, okay.
And, get to talk to you again soon. Thanks a lot. Thank you.